The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stage Door Show tonight. This is Dave Hondell. Tonight, I have one of the stars of the horror thriller Swallowed, Jose Colon, and the writer, producer, and director of that film, and one of the busiest professionals in Hollywood, Carter Smith. So welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And, Jose, I want to start with you. I know you played Dom in Swallowed, and I wanted to ask you, how was it working with one of the top directors in Hollywood and Carter Smith?
Really a dream, man. Carter's such a pro. I had so much fun making this movie. You know what I mean? For my first sort of coming into the business like this and working with a director like Carter, I mean, I had a blast. I couldn't ask for sort of a better way to get started. You know what I mean?
And he can't say anything bad about me because I'm right here.
Well, honestly, I love horror, the genre horror. And, my next question, Jose, is this, working as your first project and being in the horror element, how was that? Because, I mean, you got to put yourself in a certain space to be in a horror film anyway, right frame of mind. So how was it for you to have your first project be in the horror genre?
I think the horror genre has some of the best fans, some of the real diehard fans. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of fun. There's really a lot of fun you can have as an actor. I mean, especially, I don't know if you've seen Swallowed yet, but especially making a movie like Swallowed, we really go there.
Yeah, that's what I love about it, because the horror genre, there's a lot of horror fans, like I said, diehard, I guess you call them, right?
Yeah.
But Carter, just being a writer, director, and producer of this horror element and thriller, this is something that you're drawn to. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that you've worked on, you've done, have been in this genre. But what attracted you to this type of storyline in horror?
I mean, I've been a horror fan since I was old enough to rent movies. I've always kind of loved, sort of testing the limits and seeing how much I could creep myself out and how scared I could get and sort of chasing. I think what a lot of horror fans do is they sort of chase that high of, the early experience of watching horror when you're really freaked out and you get home and you lock all the windows and you can't quite come to terms with the fact that if you're alone or if you're not alone, and that like that, level of base fear is always something that we're, as horror fans, are chasing.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, it was always, my kind of favorite genre. And I mean, I think that, one of the things that's interesting about horror is that you can, if you have a film that sort of functions as a horror film, you have a lot of freedom to explore other stuff and other types of characters and other sorts of storylines that, as long as you're delivering on the horror of it, then you can, there's a lot of freedom to, to do stuff that, you might be sort of more traditionally considered a drama film, but, drama films don't have the same, drama films are great, don't get me wrong, but they don't have a rabid fan base and hundreds of festivals of fans waiting to see these films. So, you can kind of have the best of both worlds in a genre like horror sometimes, I think.
Yeah, that's well said. The other thing about the horror genre that I like personally is the thriller aspect of it, like the not knowing, the anticipation, maybe something might happen, but maybe it doesn't, but maybe it does right after you think it's going to happen. And as a director and a writer, I mean, do you ever think about that in the story? Like when we're going to put the scare element.
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, so it's got to be exciting. I mean, to be able to do that and to pull it off. And when you see the final product, when it's the edited product with the music and everything else, because I know sometimes when you shoot a scene, it might not seem scary at the time, or might not seem like that until you put all the elements in.
Yeah, it's all about the timing and the pacing and the edit and the music and how it all fits together. Yeah.
So as a director, is it difficult sometimes to direct the actors and to know what your vision is at the end, to see that edited product, but to get it to that point? I mean, do you find it challenging, or is that something you're just so used to doing?
Well, I think that there's two different things. There's in a movie like Swallowed, what I did a lot, or what I tried to do a lot in the script, was every time there's a turning point, for these characters, things sort of go off in this different direction. And I mean, just like the characters, we as an audience are sort of learning about this, just like we're not a step ahead of them. We're experiencing this story, right along with them. And as, they make these decisions that may or may not be bad decisions, like things veer off into some like more horrible direction.
Yeah.
And so that's something fun to play with in a script. Like, how can you surprise people, and how can you, make the story take turns that people aren't expecting?
Yeah.
But then, there's also, the element of like a little bit what you were talking about was like sort of crafting a scare.
Right.
And, there's different types of scares, and there's like jump scares, which are very specific. And then there's like, in Swallowed, we have a couple of sort of long, slow burns, sort of sink in your seat, squirm. And is it really going to happen? Oh, no, it's not going to. Oh, it is going to happen. Like, there's a lot of like sort of dread and anticipation.
Yeah. Just when.
Which was a little bit different. So that, you sort of have to approach each of those types of scenarios differently. But yeah, I mean, until you're in the edit room playing with frames and seconds and music cues, that's when you really do the fine tuning. I mean, on set, when you're shooting stuff, you have to have a pretty clear idea of what you want, but oftentimes you let things go longer, or you shoot more than you need, knowing that you're gonna have a lot of work to do in the edit room, not because of anything that you've shot that you don't like, but just to have the option to sort of draw something out or change it up a little bit.
So, and Jose, being this is your first debut in a feature like this, I mean, when you saw the final product, I mean, what did you feel? I mean, because for me, being a director myself in shorts, when I see something on screen, it's almost like a spiritual experience to see it all come together. And as you as an actor, how do you feel when you first see yourself on screen, when everything's all put together?
I first saw Swallowed, I think, in Overlook Film Festival. So that was, I forgot where that was at, but I mean, I was just sort of in love, like I did a lot of training. I was studying in New York, doing a lot of off Broadway. So it was nice to finally see myself on screen.
Yeah.
It took a lot of work. But that's sort of how it is. It takes a lot of time to make a movie. Like it takes a lot of people, and it's incredibly difficult. But I felt like $1 million, man.
So when you were in the theater doing off Broadway, like you said, when you because I know stage acting is much different than film and TV. Yeah. So was it a hard transition going from the stage when you're projecting to the last row, as they say, versus having to have more subtle, I guess, expressions and the way you're speaking? And I'm sure working for Carter, I mean, it made it a lot easier given his experience, but he was an actor. Did you find it challenging to go from the theater to screen? I don't think it was that hard of a challenge. I mean, I did about 2.5 years, 3 years of theater in New York. And then I knew that I wanted to come to Los Angeles. I knew that I wanted to live in Hollywood. And I knew that I wanted to have a serious career in movies and in film. Theater is great. I mean, you got to start somewhere. You know what I mean? You got to gain experience somehow, especially if you don't live in Los Angeles. So, yeah. But I didn't feel like the transition was necessarily difficult. No. Carter, as a director, I mean, do you feel, because out in Los Angeles, I mean, obviously that's the mecca of entertainment, and as an actor, we have a lot of young actors that are listening right now. And do you feel that Los Angeles is the place you got to be to get into this industry, or New York? I mean, one of the two. Or do you feel that people could make a career for themselves in the small town that they live in right now? I mean, do you feel you got to move at some point?
I mean, I think that, it's wherever you are, you just have to start. And then, if you're in, some small town somewhere, find it's not going to hurt if you get the experience in whatever kind of local theater, commercials, whatever it is. But the New Yorks and LAs and the sort of the shooting meccas of the industry, that's where people cast out of. And, there's something to be said for being available and around and, right here. I mean, that said, I did a film last year in New Orleans, and, we were, we cast a couple of the leads, for sort of from anywhere, but then all of the supporting parts were, sort of local hires from the New Orleans area. So, I think that there's that aspect of sort of, getting in the door and getting in front of casting directors and projects. But I mean, there's kind of nothing like being in, a New York or LA, to be honest.
And your background in fashion, I know you started out in fashion and doing a lot of like big work with photography with Vogue, GQ, and some of the biggest magazines out there.
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel that being a director on film, I mean, do you feel that it gives you kind of an edge to know what the world wants to see on screen, like what wardrobe and makeup and hair and everything else that you've dealt with for so many years? Do you feel that the trends, and you feel, does that kind of help you as a director kind of help put everything together?
I mean, I don't know if it's so much about trends, but what it did do was sort of train me in terms of framing and developing an eye for where the camera needs to be, and to best kind of convey the emotion of whatever it is that we're shooting. I think that one of the things that I would do in photography, at least, is I was always trying to tell stories, like visual stories, and with stills, you're doing that in 1/125th of a second. You've got one frame to tell the story,
right.
And in that frame, every single thing has to contribute to that story, and that is that's the painting on the wall behind the person you're photographing. That's the color of the lipstick. That's the way that the collar falls. It's everything that's in that frame, and I think that being sort of trained in that way to notice all those things and to make sure that those things contribute to how you want the person viewing to feel, is kind of a great thing to come to film and directing with. That I don't think I had realized how important that would have been if I hadn't been taking pictures for so long before I made my first film.
Right. I think, that was a natural progression. I think from photography, like you said, you have to tell the story in one shot. It's almost a luxury to be able to tell it throughout a 2-hour film. Right.
Yep.
Jose, I just wanted to, did you grow up in New York?
Yeah. I grew up in Lower East Side, Manhattan.
So do you feel like growing up in New York City gave you kind of a leg up on the arts because you're around it all the time? I mean, growing up in, it doesn't matter what borough you're in, you're so close to theater, you're so close to, shooting, that they're shooting on the street, Law and Order or whatever they're shooting at any given day. I mean, being around it all the time, did that help you?
Yeah. I mean, when I was about 17 or 18, I got into modeling for a bit, and I did some modeling in New York, and that's sort of how I met Carter, through an old sort of agent friend of mine. And I mean, I was always into like art, I guess, or I don't know, just trying to express myself somehow or find some kind of identity. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I mean, and then Carter, obviously, being in the industry both in New York and LA and so forth. I mean, finding people like Jose and the rest of your cast. I mean, it's got to be rewarding, I guess, to put together such a successful film and such a great story that you wrote and directed and produced, basically everything. And to put together the cast. I mean, the cast is really important. And so how much of a piece did you have in the casting of your movie?
Oh, I mean, the whole thing. I mean, this film started 100% with Jose. I had photographed him, just a friend, like he said, a friend, an agent in New York had said, oh, this kid Jose, he's in LA, you should shoot him.
Yeah.
And we shot together, and oftentimes when I'm taking portraits of someone, like I'll kind of in my head just sort of come up with a character for them. And, we spent an afternoon together and it went great. And then I went back to Maine and I was working on a script, and this character named Dom just kind of showed up in the script, and he looked like Jose and he sounded like Jose and he had the same tattoos as Jose. And like Perfect. All of a sudden, Jose was Dom. And so he, a lot of times, it happens like that where, one sort of chance encounter can sort of inspire something. So I went off and started writing, always with him in mind. And then, I always like to write with specific actors in mind, even if, it never ends up, ending up with them. But like, I wrote, the part of Rich for Mark Patton, and, I had Jenna Malone in mind for Alice. So it was kind of a dream come true for me, because everyone that I had sort of imagined from the beginning, was who ended up in the film, which was always nice.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's got to be rewarding to, like I said, to kind of handpick somebody too, because sometimes, films have casting directors. Sometimes the director is like completely involved, and sometimes they're not as involved. But to have, somebody who's writing, directing, and producing, to have total control like that, that's got to be great for somebody like you, right? Yeah.
And I didn't have a casting director. I had Jose in mind. I'd worked with Jenna before on the Ruins, and so we had stayed friends and talked about doing something together. And then, Mark Patton, I just DM'd him on Instagram. I was like, I wrote a movie and there's a part for you, and and he was kind of like, really? I don't know. This seems shady. I don't know. And I was like, no, I'm a real director. I really did. We're really gonna make this movie. And it took a little convincing, but it just. I didn't have a casting director. It was down to me to do it. So I was calling in, doing the work myself, which is,
right.
It's not always easy, but when it works out like it did on this, it's super rewarding.
And that goes right into a lot of our listening audience is they're indie producers, directors, actors.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of stuff ourselves, obviously. Yep. But in 2008, your directorial debut is Ruins. For feature length, and then 2014 Jamie Marks Is Dead, and then of course Swallowed. And I think since 2008, that was a while ago, but when you go through like COVID and things that we've kind of went through the last couple of years, did it give you more of a chance to kind of to write a little more during that time frame? And because we weren't able to be on set, I guess, for quite a while, did that give you a chance to kind of have a little reprieve and get a chance to write a little more?
Yeah, but also it was like after I made The Ruins, like I hadn't sort of given up my photography career. I sort of still had one foot in both. And so sure. I made that film, and then I went back to shooting and shot for a couple of years, and sort of was in a position where I didn't have to take a film necessarily, as a job, because I had this other day job that I could do, and I could wait for the right film.
Sure.
And I wrote a lot of scripts and tried to get a lot of projects up off the ground. And, it's not always easy. Like, I had a lot of frustrating time spent on projects that didn't come together for one reason or another. And, that's part of what was the genesis of Swallowed, was like writing something that I knew that I would be able to go out and make with a minimal crew of like diehard, like, friends and supporters and other sort of creative people that I had worked with. And, yes, it would be great to get, $1 million and, everyone has trailers and gets paid well. And, but no, like it was also, it was sort of conceived from the script stage to be a project that could be done with a minimal crew, sort of guerrilla style.
Sure.
And, and that's what we ended up doing. And it was, I think in a lot of ways, a much more rewarding experience. There wasn't anyone giving notes. There wasn't anyone, sort of saying, well, you really can't cast Jose because no one knows who he is. And you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of thing you run into. And I didn't have to deal with any of that. So it was kind of a dream scenario.
Yeah. Like Carter said, though, that was one of my fears when Carter was talking about the script, like, oh fuck, like nobody knows who the fuck I am. Like, there's no way I'm gonna. I know I can act. I believe in myself, but there's no way I'm gonna get this part. You know what I mean? Especially, I knew who Carter was. Carter was already so well established. You know what I mean? And that was sort of one of my fears. But I'm so happy that he gave me the part. And then I got to show some of my.
Well, and the fact that it takes so long to for people to see it, like it's finally, the Swallowed is finally coming out on February 14th. And, we filmed it a while ago. So like most people still have not been able to see how brilliant Jose is in the movie, like on February 14th, he'll have this film that he can actually, share with people, it was super exciting.
And then coming out on Valentine's Day too. I mean, just the trailer, it's amazing. And, you know, just like I said, just the whole movie that, you know, Jose, again, you know, sky's the limit for you. And, you know, just, you know, what kind of advice, I mean, now that you've been in this movie, what kind of advice can you give other young actors that have been in the theater and maybe hoping to have a feature film themselves? I mean, what kind of advice can you give them?
This might sound a little banal, but I think be prepared, you know, stay prepared, and there's really nowhere to start. Don't quit. It gets incredibly hard. Talk to people, talk to friends, talk to family members. Don't quit, and just stay prepared, and just have a really solid vision.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's good advice. How about you, Carter? What kind of advice can you give either new actors or new directors, somebody that's like an indie artist that's out there that maybe, you know, doesn't have the funds, I guess, or so they think, to put something out? Maybe they're a little discouraged. I mean, what kind of advice can you give them?
I mean, I think that the especially when you're starting out, one of the most important things is to find a community of creative people that you can surround yourself with, and, you know, create stuff together and sort of build those relationships. Even if you're making, you know, 1-minute short films, or, you know, improv stand-up shows, or impromptu street perform, like whatever it is that you're doing, if you start to build those relationships and find those people that inspire you and you inspire them, and you sort of make each other better. There's so many people that I, you know, worked with on Swallowed and work with on other projects that I've been working with for such a long time. And those relationships and those sort of creative collaborations only get better. You know, the longer, once you find those right people, it's like magic. And you don't have to be successful, and you don't have to have money, and you don't have to have any of the sort of traditional, you know, kind of trappings of, you know, success to start those relationships early on. And those are the ones that are going to come back and reward you, you know, down the line, if you kind of water the seeds.
Yeah. I mean, it's about relationship building in this business, and networking, definitely.
And it doesn't take as much money as you think. Like, you know, you just because
exactly.
you think you don't have enough money to make a film, like you can make a film with, you know, very little. I mean, there's no shortage of micro budget films that are super inspiring. Yeah.
You can do it with an iPhone. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing what, you know, there's a lot of great stories out there that need to be told, I think. And regardless of how you tell it, I mean, if you do it in a way that it makes sense on whatever format you're shooting it on, just do it. You know, that's my message as well. And, you know, before we go, just, you know, February 14th, talk about where the fans and listeners can find Swallowed.
Yeah, they can find it, pretty much wherever you rent or buy movies, you know, the Amazons, the iTunes, you know, it'll be on all the platforms.
Great. And then before we go, I ask everybody this question. I'm going to start with you, Jose. When it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to think about when they think of Jose Colon?
Oh, that's a pretty loaded question.
I'm glad you got that one first. I hope I get a different one.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to sit here and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. I just hope that people follow me, they continue to see the work that I do, and they just believe in themselves, you know what I mean? And Dave, you know, I really appreciate you having me on here. It means a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're honored to have you on, Jose. Thank you. And then Carter, I guess I'll ask you the same question. What do you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done?
I mean, I want to, you know, to tell stories, and I want people to, you know, sort of experience those stories and enjoy those stories and come on board for the ride, and sort of, you know, have the experience of getting swept up in the stories that I want to tell, or that I choose to tell. And if audiences do that, then I'm happy.
Well, both of you, I can't thank you enough for being on our show and taking the time to be on our show, and also give advice to my listeners. You know, Swallowed, can't wait till that comes out on the 14th. So everybody listening, you got to check it out. Again, the trailer is amazing. I love this genre. So I can't wait, again, to just sit down and just watch this amazing film. And, you know, again, thank you both for your time. And
watch it in the dark with your
Continued
phone in
success.
a drawer,
Exactly. Put
with the
phone
sound
away.
turned up loud. That's all I ask of you.
Exactly. But again, thank you both, and continued success to you both.
Thank you so much.